App switcher. Close. Activate default. Replay. Home button. Replay. You are on a walk, contemplating your life. No friends, no family, and stuck at a dead-end job. Sad, isn't it? But it hadn't always been this way. You wonder where it all went wrong. Being lost in thought, you fail to notice that you have walked directly onto a busy road. Unluckily for you, a truck ends up hitting you. There is pain. So much pain. You realize that you are dying. Slowly, your vision fades to black. Ellipsis. Next button. You wake up to the soft cooing of a woman. Absent-mindedly, you notice that she is very pretty. Ask her who she is, button. You try to talk to her, but your voice comes out in next, button. 6 years ago you were hit by a truck and died. By a twist of fate, you were reincarnated and given another chance at life. Hopefully, you won't mess up the second chance. You look at yourself in the mirror. The face reflected is of a young boy. You come to learn that your name is John. Your father in this life is called Robert, while your mother is called Julia. Recently, Julia and Robert have been fighting a lot. You try to interfere, button. In your last life, your parents divorced. Confront Julia, button. What would you like to ask her? Why are you and Dad fighting? Is everything going to be okay? Button. Why are you and Dad fighting? Button. Is everything going to... Julia smiles at you sadly and hugs you. Don't worry, sweetie, she murmurs quietly. Everything is going to be okay. Next button. Everything is not okay. Why ask such a passive question? Next button. A few days later, Julia and Robert agree to separate with one another. They ask you who you would like to live with. Live with Julia. Financially. Next button. Next. You have begun. Next button. You have begun elementary school. Julia has sent you to a local public school near the house she is renting. Next button. Although you are 8 years old, I want candy. Button. I don't want candy. Good call. Next button. Next. On a different day, on one of your walks, say do nothing. Button. The boy gets hit by the truck and next button. Your homeroom teacher has noticed you've been scoring very well. Don't do that great. Button. You don't try that. Next button. Next. One day you notice one of your classmates crying softly to herself. Ignore her. Button. Comfort her. Button. You go over to her. She looks at you. Next button. You start to notice that girl is always staring at you. Next button. It's been a few weeks since elementary school has started, and you still haven't made any friends. No, yes, button. No, but yes, button. What type of person would someone popular? Speech off. Make small talk, button. Christina is almost never alone, but you manage to catch her at a moment where she is. You approach her from behind and lightly tap her on her shoulder. She turns around, startled. You clear your throat. Hey, next button. Christina is almost never alone, but you manage to catch her at a moment where she is. You approach her from behind and lightly tap her on her shoulder. She turns around, startled. You clear your throat. Hey, you say. She looks at you, curious, and says hi back, thanking for you for time where you comforted her. She's nice to talk to, bubbly, warm, and kind. She also seems very, ellipsis, excited to talk to you. Next button. You pass elementary school with relative ease. For now, you have decided to hide your intelligence, getting high, but not too high, marks. Next button. It's the first day of school, your first day of 6th grade. Unfortunately, you and Christina are not in the same class as one another. Christina was particularly distressed about this fact. Your assigned seat is next to the window. A shy/timid-looking girl sits to your right, and to her right sits a girl with impeccably applied makeup. Next button. Days pass slowly, and you are blissfully content. School is still very easy. Christina is extremely popular, and you find it hard to spend time with her in school. She also lives quite far from you, so it's not like spending time with her outside of school is any easier. Slowly, you find yourself drifting further and further away from her. Instead, you've become quite close to the people sitting near you. Makeup girl, you come to learn, is named Rachel. Despite her intimidating appearance and abrasive personality, next button. Because of her good looks and extroverted personality, Rachel is quite popular with the male gender. She doesn't try to hide her attractiveness, but rather, revels in it. As a result, at next button. Some other girls have become quite annoyed with the attention Rachel receives from the male gender, and have retaliated by trash talking. Pretend you didn't care, button. Confront these girls, button. You sigh tiredly, before walking up to these group of girls. Hey, what you're doing is really pathetic, you say. The girls angrily tell you to mind your own business. Afterwards, Emily smiles and tells you that you look really cool while telling them off. Next button. Your science teacher announces that there will be a group project worth 30% of your final grade. You will group off in pairs. Unfortunately, you will not be able to choose your partner. Rachel and Emily get paired off with one another. You get paired off with Christina, which is nice. You both used to be so. Suggest your house, button. Suggest her house, button. Suggest your house. She happily agrees to. You both set a date to work on the project this weekend. She says she misses you, and wishes that you both hadn't drifted so far apart. You stay silent at that comment. She smiles and says bye, before walking back to her group of next button. You let Julia know that Christina will come over. Next button. Fast forward a few days later, and it's the weekend. Julia drops you off at Christina's place. She comments it's been a while since she's dropped you off here. You ring the doorbell, and Christina greets you and Julia. Julia gushes over Christina, and comments on how pretty she has become. Christina smiles lightheartedly in response. Julia waits until you are inside before driving off. Christina ushers you into the living room to do the work. She says her parents are out of town, so feel free to make yourself at home. Next button. It's nice, ellipsis, talking to Christina again. Yes, button. It's nice, ellipsis, yes, button. You say that you'd like to, but you'll have to ask your mom first. You text Julia, asking if it's alright to stay over. Julia doesn't seem to mind, and says she'll pick you up in next button. It's late at night, and you're tucked in quite comfortably in bed. You start to hear weird no button. You ignore the sounds. Afterwards, you sleep rather peacefully that night. In the morning, you have a pleasant chat with Christina. Sometime later, you tell Christina that your mother has come to pick you up, and thank her for her hospitality. Christina smiles, and says no problem, it was a pleasure. She mentions that she misses you, that it was nice seeing you again, and that you should come over more often. Next button. You and Christina receive full marks for the project. Great job. Next button. From now on, Christina makes more of an effort to acknowledge your presence, saying hi to you in the hallways and such. You aren't as close as you once were, but it's a start. Both Rachel and Emily seem to be under the impression that Christina liked you, so they look on, making playful jokes. Ellipsis. Next button. Emily seems really stressed these days, and you assume it has to do with her home life. From what you've garnered, she doesn't have the best relationship with her parents. As her friend, you want to help her, but you aren't sure you are close enough to her to approach her directly. You also don't want to prod unnecessarily. Do you want to ask Emily if she's okay? No, don't prod unnecessarily button. You leave the issue alone. You're her friend, but you aren't /close, so you feel like it would be inappropriate to prod. This was probably the wrong choice. Emily commits suicide a few days later. Next button. While you and Rachel are certainly friendly with one another, you rarely, if ever, spend time with one another without Emily's presence. Now that Emily is gone, ellipsis, you both become a lot closer. You both miss Emily, wish you would have noticed something was wrong earlier. But you didn't. And now she's gone. But, you can't wallow in the past like this. You know Emily wouldn't have wanted you to. So you try not to. It's hard, but you do it. One day, next button. While you and Rachel are certainly friendly with one another, you rarely, if ever, spend time with one another without Emily's presence. Now that Emily is gone, ellipsis, you both become a lot closer. You both miss Emily, wish you would have noticed something was wrong earlier. But you didn't. And now she's gone. But, you can't wallow in the past like this. You know Emily wouldn't have wanted you to. So you try not to. It's hard, but you do it. One day Rachel messages you, asking for your advice. Your conversation goes like this. Next button. Rachel, John, you're a guy, right? You, ellipsis, yes. Rachel, I need help, I like this guy, what do I do? You, next button. You, lol dude, if you like him just ask him out, it is desperate button. You, lol dude, if you like him just ask him out. He'd probably be flattered. Rachel, isn't it desperate if the girl makes the first move? You hesitate before answering. Some guys enjoy the chase, and you think it is desperate. Other guys disagree, and find it flattering. It isn't desperate button. You, do you really want to go out? Next button. A week later, Rachel messages you in a fit of panic. Rachel, oh my god John, the first thing I want to break up with Ethan. You, why? Rachel, he's too depressive, insecure, and has a ton of issues. I didn't want to be a therapist. You, lol, next time don't choose a guy based solely on his looks. Rachel, greater than underscore greater than. Rachel, should I break up with him in person, or in person, button. You, it's common courtesy to break up in person. Next button. It's lunchtime, and you are off to meet Rachel in the school courtyard. Midway, you are stopped by Christina. She asks you if you would like to sit with her group of friends instead today. Would you accept her invitation, button. Come on, ellipsis, Emily died not too long ago and Rachel needs your support. You both only have each other right now, ellipsis, you accept Christina's offer, sending Rachel a quick text informing them that you won't be able to hang out at lunch today. You follow Christina, who leads you to her, ellipsis, extremely large friendship group. The gender, next button. Once you have returned to your homeroom class, you tell Rachel of the events that transpired, and how you felt awkwardly out of place. Rachel smacks you on the back of your head, and tells you to stop being so awkward. She wished you would have also invited her though. She didn't like spending lunchtime alone. Next button. The school year has almost ended. Next year, you'll be in year 7, your second year of middle school. You are excited of what is to come. Right now, you are walking down a long flight of stairs. Absent-mindedly, you miss a step. Your head hits something hard. Then, your world fades to black. Next button. You wake up 4 years later. You are in a white bed, surrounded by white walls. You are hooked up to a lot of machines. Some you know the names of, and some you don't. There is no one in the room, so you just kind of stare blankly into space for the next few hours, until someone does enter the room. Next button. The man who enters is dressed in white, a doctor. He explains your circumstances, and how you got here. The gist of it is, 4 years ago you fell down a flight of stairs in your school. You fell really badly, and had hit your head against a particularly sharp stair corner. As a result, you fell into a deep coma. You sigh. Of course something like this would happen to you. The doctor asks you if you remember everything before you fell. You tell him you do. He pauses, and says that is good. He informs you that some patients that fall into a coma also experience memory loss as well. After a few moments of silence, he tells you that he has informed your parents that you have awoken. They will be coming shortly. Prepare yourself. Next button. A few hours later Julia bursts into the room, along with Robert. Although you know they aren't on the best of terms, being divorced and all, you're glad they can come together and be civil to one another in this moment. Julia cries at the sight of you, and promptly hugs you. Meanwhile, Robert stands awkwardly near the door, but says he is glad you are well, and conscious. Robert leaves a few hours later, but Julia stays well into the night. Next button. You wake up pretty early the next morning. Julia is asleep, resting upright on a chair beside your hospital bed. You watch her, smiling. You stay like this for the next couple of hours. When she wakes up, she cries and gives you another hug. The next few days are like this. Next button. During your stay, you remember briefly asking about Rachel, ellipsis, and Christina. Julia pauses for a moment when you ask this. She says Rachel visited for 6 months straight. She stopped coming because she had given up hope that you would ever wake up. On the other hand, Christina visited you once every year, just to check up on your condition. Apparently, she had visited just 2 weeks ago. You hope you can reconnect with both of them in the near future. Next, button. A few days later the doctor says you are well enough to be discharged. Julia cries at this piece of information. Ever since you woke up, she's been crying non-stop. You feel kind of bad about it. Thank God you can leave now though. A few days later the doctor says you are well enough to be discharged. Julia cries at this piece of information. Ever since you woke up, she's been crying non-stop. You feel kind of bad about it. Thank God you can leave now though. Now you can think about what you would like to do with your life. Next, button. Julia frets over you for the next couple of days. You insist that you would like to return to school immediately, but she is very concerned about your health and well-being. Days turn into weeks. Next, Julia frets over you for the next couple of days. You insist that you would like to return to school immediately, but she is very concerned about your health and well-being. Days turn into weeks. Eventually, you wear her down to the point where she agrees that you can return to school. When you had just finished year 6. 4 years have passed since then, so you will already be in high school. You'll be in year 11. The school year hasn't started yet, so you'll have some time to mentally prepare yourself. Next, button. A week before school starts, you meet the principal to alert him of your imminent return. He is wary of placing you in year 11 because he is afraid that you will not be able to keep up. He is aware that you were an outstanding student in year 6, however, a brilliant year 6 student is still likely to not be on the same level as a year 11 student. You acknowledge that he is probably right, but stress out the fact you that are special, and that he should make an exception for you. Hesitantly, he allows you to sit a placement test. If you pass the test, you may proceed directly into year 11. You accept his offer. Next, button. Naturally, you score very well on the placement test. Reluctantly, the principal allows you to proceed directly into year 11. Next, button. The start of the school year begins. You are the talk of the school. Everywhere you walk, you see and hear people whispering about you. They point at you. They stare at you. It's that guy who fell into a coma a few years ago, you hear them say. You try to ignore all the attention you are receiving. It's hard. Next, button. You haven't seen Christina or Rachel yet, but you hope you can meet them soon. Before that though, quick question, do you want to pursue a romantic relationship with any of these girls? No, button. Hey, sorry man. In this game, you have to pick a girl all. Next, button. Hey, replay, heading. Hey, next, button. Who are you interested in? Rachel, button. Rachel, wrong choice. Unfortunately, due to your past actions, Christina really liked you. I feel bad leaving Christina in the sidelines, so I'll have Christina, button. Alright, let's go find Christina. You head to your assigned homeroom. Man, wouldn't it be convenient if she was placed in your homeroom? Next, button. Christina is sitting mid-row, mid-center. There are no pre-planned seating arrangements in high school, and right now she's sitting alone, ellipsis, which is surprising. No doubt she would have been surrounded by a horde of people if you had come in later. You walk over to her right, and make yourself at home. Next, button. Slowly, you turn to her and smile. It's been a long time, you say. She cracks a smile in response. Next, button. You and Christina converse for a while, to catch up. She fills you in on the details of what happened once you fell into a coma. She became distraught once she learned of your accident. She says the accident made her realize that there weren't many people that she cared about in her life. It's, ellipsis, a deep thing to admit, but at the time you... Next, button. You don't know how to respond to that, ellipsis, so you don't. You didn't know she cared much about you, ellipsis, it's nice. Other people start filing into the room, and are curious at your presence. You expect a dozen of Christina's friends to magically show up, but surprisingly there are only, ellipsis, 2. They greet her, and she greets them back. You raise one of your eyebrows as if to say, that's all? Christina smiles and winks in return. She whispers, it's really all I need. Next, button. You come to learn in the following days that Christina has changed a lot. I mean, physically, she looks pretty much the same. But in terms of her personality, she's a lot more rash, a lot more abrasive. It seems like she cares less of how others perceive her. She looks a lot happier now though. Before, she would always have a strange smile on her face. Next, button. One day after school has ended, Christina pulls you aside and says that she needs to tell you something. Suspicious, you ask her what is it. Usually, she would just bluntly state her intentions. You think I'm pretty, she states. It's true, so you stay silent. Next, button. Satisfied, she continues her speech. I like you, she blurts out. You feel your heart beating really fast. Next, button. That means we're dating now. You're my boyfriend. Next, button. Life is great. You can't stop grinning at how great it is. You have a nice, well, to you anyway, smart, and beautiful girlfriend, ellipsis, who loves you a lot. You also have great grades, and a loving parent in Julia. It's kind of scary how much Christina likes you though. Every time you turn to stare at her, she'd already be looking at you. Next, button. The next 2 years go by in a flash. You stay together with Christina. Your relationship with Christina is intense. She's like your best friend, but more. She understands you so well. You've both received great grades. You, through, ellipsis, the knowledge of your past life. Christina has always been a genius. Without studying, she'd always... Next, button. Replay. Christina has decided to pursue a degree in law. You reckon she'll do brilliantly, she has the charisma for it. You on the other hand, have decided to pursue, ellipsis, well, ellipsis, you're not too sure yet. Next, button. Replay. On a whim, you decided you want to become a high school teacher. In the past, you've tutored some of the slower students in your class for fun and had enjoyed that. Teaching is similar to tutoring, right, ellipsis. Next, button. In particular, you have decided that you would like to become a math teacher. Why? Next, button. The transition to university is a bit of a struggle. Unlike high school, teachers will not spoon-feed or coddle you. They are also not interested in your potential. You will have to work hard, star cough star, to receive good grades. Christina has always had a good work ethic, so she has no trouble at all with the university transition. Next, button. You barely pass your first semester of calculus. It's a hard lesson to learn as you've always done so well in this life. Nevertheless, this shock drives you to try harder. You never come close to failing a class again. Next, button. Making friends in university is simple enough. Everyone is friendly, and unlike high school. Next, button. One of your friends has invited you to a night out to the pub. Would you like to go? No, button. You thank him for his offer, but say that you're behind on your schoolwork and needs to catch up. He understands and says that he'll talk to you later. Next, button. The days spent with Christina are nice. Your relationship is still going strong. Smiley. Next, button. You've decided to live in a dorm for university. Christina has decided to live at home. One of your roommates really likes smoking weed. He offers you some one day. Would you like to partake in smoke the weed? Button. Reject the weed? Button. You decide to reject his offer. He smiles and says, "Ain't sure, you're missing out though, buddy. Maybe you are, but it's better safe than sorry." Next, button. Sometimes you wonder why Christina ever agreed to go out with you. While you aren't bad to look at by any stretch of the imagination, people often comment that she is way out of your league. You agree with this observation. Next, button. Sometimes you feel a little insecure, but Christina always reassures you otherwise. Over time these comments affect you less and less. If she wanted to be with a guy who looked like Brad Pitt, she would have done so already. Next, button. It's your 2-year anniversary. On this day Christina tells you that she has something important to tell you. You can tell that this is no ordinary matter. Usually Christina is quite carefree and laid back, but this time she seems utterly serious. Next, button. She asks if you love her. You say that. Next, button. She starts you to tell you a story. It is a story about the death of her parents. She asks you if you remember the story. Your memory is hazy, but you seem to recall bits and details. Next, button. You remember that Christina was distraught during this period of time. You figured that it was a sensitive topic, so in all the time you have dated you have never delved further into this. Next, button. Apparently her sadness was a lie. Why? Because she killed them. Next, button. Well, one of them. The part about her father killing her mother was true, however his death was not a suicide. Rather, Christina killed him. Next, button. Her dad had always been abusive. She had to always conform to his expectations. If she ever failed one of these expectations, she would be locked in the basement. Her mother was a pushover, and let all the abuse slide. One day during one of their arguments, he had accidentally killed her mother. Immediately, he started planning on how to cover her death. Her father made her sick. So she killed him. Next, button. She asks you if you will still accept her even after all of this. Do you still want to stay together with stay together, button. You tell her that you understand why she did the things she did, and that you still love her Next, button. She leads you to her room. Although you have been dating for 2 years now, you haven't Next, button. What she shows you, ellipsis, irks you. There are photographs and posters of you everywhere in her room. It seems like she's dedicated. Next, button. She tells you that she never forgot about that time you comforted her that time in middle school and that ever act creeped out, button. You are thoroughly creeped out and tell her so. Christina looks at you with eyes full of despair and betrayal. You said you love me, ellipsis, this is Next, button. You turn to leave the house. As soon as you turn you are hit with a sudden electrical shock. Christina has tasted you. You watch as she stands over your motionless body, silent. Next, button. You ask her what she is doing. In response she starts heavily crying and asks you, why can't you understand? Next, button. Christina puts something into her mouth and makes you swallow it. She swallows the same thing as well. She cradles your face and kisses you. A few moments later, you both die. Christina puts something into her mouth and makes screen recording in progress. Screen recording in progress.